Hey everyone and welcome to another Let's Max Warframe, where today we've got some content to look at. Woohoo! Today we're taking a look though at the brand new weapon that comes with the Chimera Prologue, and that's the Paracesis. Now, it's a new entry to the heavy blade category of weapons, which is kind of amusing since we've just got the Grand Prime, which is also a heavy blade, but the Paracesis represents something new and honestly pretty unique. It's not just the stats, which are admittedly pretty damn good. Base damage of 144, it's only lower than a couple of weapons in the class, including the Grand Prime and the Galantine Prime. The majority of that damage comes with Slash, which is super nice for Slash procs, combining it with Viral for an amazingly well scaling combo. 31% crit chance is super high too. Obviously that's going to be more than enough to take advantage of the 2.8 times critical damage multiplier. Status chance of 12 isn't that great though, and while with a couple of dual stats it's going to proc about 33% of the time, it's not the most reliable thing in the world, although it is just about enough to make a viral slash build work alright. The rest of the stats are kind of irrelevant to be honest, however what does make the Paracesis different is a couple of interesting mechanics. The least interesting of the two mechanics is the fact it has an extended reach on its slam attack, meaning it can be rather nice crowd control if you combine it with Tempo Royale stance like I do, and Prime Reach can help with that too. However, the biggest and by far the most interesting feature of the weapon, for every former that you put onto the weapon, which is good news for me, up to a maximum of 5 former, you're going to increase the weapon's mod capacity up to 40 and increase a base stat that the weapon has built in, which is damage to sentience, up to a maximum of 60%. Once you hit 5 former though, you will not only have additional damage to sentience, but a hit from this weapon will reset all of the sentient resistances, meaning that damage from this weapon will never be counted like traditional weapons are. This is a really interesting feature, and rewards putting former into the weapon. The buffs are directly tied to the former themselves as well, not the polarities added. I tested this by adding a polarity and then removing it, which kept both the sentient damage buff and the mod capacity increased. So it carried on increasing despite taking polarities off, so it is directly, like I say, directly tied to the former. If you've done the prologue, you know this is designed to be a weapon to end the war with the sentience, and this special feature will make it easier to do so, especially when the sentience actually finally invade our galaxy in the new war. So, with that said, how did I go about modding the Paracesis? Well, I've got 5 former on here to buff up our damage to the sentience. I've got 2 very specific builds. I've got one which is very sentient focused, and one that is more rest of the game focused, I guess I'm going to call it. This one here in config 8 is going to be my Sentient Slayer, which is why we've got both of the sacrificial mods in here, the melee damage and the sacrificial steel. We're then running Prime Fury for attack speed, Blood Rush, which is going to work with the sacrificial steel. So we've got 65% base, well I say base, 65% critical chance with the sacrificial steel. Blood Rush means we're going to be red critting almost immediately, so that is really very nice. We've got Drifting Contact to make sure to make the most out of Blood Rush, plus gives a bit more status chance. Organ Shatter for the crit damage, and then we're going to run Prime, Fever Strike, and Vicious Frost. 24% status chance doesn't sound a lot, but, I mean, it's not too bad. 1.4 attacks a second means that you're going to be proccing reasonably regularly, so I find it's kind of worth it. However, if you don't like the Prime Fever Strike, you could always switch that out for the Virulent Scourge dual stat, and that gives you 32%. It's a bit of a hefty drop in damage, however, it does give you slightly more reliable status procs. I went with the damage over the additional status, but that's very much a personal preference thing if you want to actually do it. The second build is more, like I say, rest of the game focus. Prime Pressure Point for damage, Prime Fury for attack speed. Now, the reason I've gone with Prime Fury is because while Berserker is going to be faster when you've got it fully stacked, but the problem is that it's very, very slow to get there. As you can see, if we remove Prime Fury, it's 0.917 attacks per second. Really, really slow, like painfully so. So until you've got those couple of things going on, a couple of crits even, it's going to be very, very slow, and it means that building up your damage is going to be quite painful. At least it was for me. It is a personal preference thing, though. I went with Prime Fury over Berserker for the more reliable speed, but you can sort of go with either here. Once again, the Blood Rush, Drifting Contact, and Organ Shatter combo. Then we've got, as well as the Prime Fever Strike, Vicious Frost for viral damage. Again, if you don't like the Prime Fever Strike, you can switch it out for Virulent for the extra status chance at the loss of quite a bit of viral damage. And then we got Condition Overload, which is going to take them, like, make the most out of those actual status chances, or the status procs, sorry, make the most out of the status chance. I found this to be sort of the stronger build of the, well, it's by far the stronger build of the two, but the thing is, while the Sentient Slayer absolutely demolishes all the sentience that we've got right now, and this one is very much built around that sort of, that game mode that we've got, or the couple of game modes that have actually got sentience, which is going to be mostly basically the lure missions, where you're up against Corpus and you're up against Grineer, as well as the sentience. Yeah, I mean, because as you know, they don't come on their own, so we've got to be able to deal with them just as effectively as the sentience. So that's why we've got to have this sort of weird hybrid sentient normal build. But this is going to be the stronger build for like the rest of the game if you want to use it against stuff that's not sentient, basically. This one scales better, it does way more damage. I mean, there's a couple of things, well, there's only really one thing I would change on this, and that's potentially Condition Overload for Prime Reach. Like, the range on Paracesis is alright, by standard, and obviously Prime Reach is going to buff that. But Prime Reach also increases the range of the slam, and that is very much the sort of special mechanic of the Paracesis, apart from the 5-former thing. But it is going to increase the range of the slam, which is really, really effective. I don't like it though, because I find that it launches enemies way far too often, and more often than not, it's going to launch them out of melee range. Even without Prime Reach, it launches them out of, like, melee range. So with Prime Reach, while it's amazing crowd control, especially when you're using the Tempo Royale right-click hold combo stance, because I'm really not a fan of Cleaving Whirlwind. I don't like that animation locked sort of whirlwind thing that you do. Not a fan. I hate being animation locked. I've died several times to that. Just while testing this, I'm not a big fan. So I'm not one for the Prime Reach, but it is an option if you like to go that way. This one is actually stronger in terms of the actual raw damage. This one absolutely just slaughters sentience. So it's very much what you like, depends on what you want to use it for. This one for any of the lower missions and any sort of sentient content that I guess we've got coming up. And this one basically for like anything else in the rest of the game is what I would go for. So after all this is said and done, do I think the weapon is worth the additional investment into it, since it's a fair amount more former than any of the other melee weapons? Honestly, it's hard to recommend it right now. It's not a bad weapon, don't get me wrong. It's going to deal with the majority of the content we have in the game right now. But I guess that's the thing. Right now, the Sentient Slayer part of the weapon is kind of irrelevant. So while for slaughtering sentience, the first build that I showed is going to be the best of the two, there's like 2 nades in the game that even have them. So it's a huge investment into a weapon for content that we don't actually have right now. Further down the line, when the new war comes out in maybe 8 months or whatever, this might be an even better weapon and have its niche as a proper Sentient Slayer. But putting a lot of investment into something now that we can't fully utilize, it's hard to recommend, especially when as a straight up melee weapon for the rest of the game. Honestly, the Galantine Prime and the Grand Prime are better weapons. The other problem I've got with recommending this is how close we are to Melee 3.0. I semi-suspect that it might come with Fortuna because of like how much they've been teasing stuff recently. What Steve said on his stream last night, that might be only 3 or 4 weeks away. So this build, like the way the weapon works right now, the former you put on, how good it is, might be completely irrelevant. We don't know how it's going to perform when Melee 3.0 drops. So the format you put on now, like I say, might be completely different to when the rework finally does come. The Paracesis, it's a solid melee weapon right now and can deal with whatever you throw it into, but it's designed for content we don't have yet, and potentially it's going to be very different when the next bit of content does come. So to be perfectly honest, save your former. I mean, 5 form is a big investment for like most players. Just wait for Melee 3.0, see how it performs then make a decision, and even then it's going to be for content that we still don't have. So I hope you enjoyed my look at the Parascesis. Let me know your thoughts on the weapon in the comments below, and as always, I shall see you in the next video.